detachment we're going to cover today.
Donc, ce sujet du détachement que nous allons couvrir aujourd'hui.
And along with detachment, we have to understand the reason we're trying to detach is because there is something we're attached to. So attachment comes first. And then after attachments, then there is commitments, and then there is detachments. So where does attachment come into our lives? It is something that is inherent in our nature because we are always seeking security, protection, and belonging. And just like as a child, when you have a little baby who is born in your household, when the baby starts to gain consciousness that the baby does not like when the mother lives the sight of the mother leaves the baby's sight, and the baby starts to cry. And the reason is baby is seeking an attachment to the mother and seeking the security of the mother. The baby is completely helpless in this world. It is dependent on caregivers, it is dependent on elders. And that attachment that it develops with the caregivers, the parents, the elders, it is a sense of security that the child feels. And you'll be surprised to know, depending on how much we were attached to our caretakers and our elders in our life, to that degree, our mental health stability is dependent on. When a child is crying for the mother and the mother doesn't show up, and the child has to cry herself or himself to sleep, it affects the neurochemical constellation of the child. The actions of the caretakers are literally shaping the biology, the physiology, and the neurochemistry of the child. And this is all due to the need, the natural need of an individual to be attached to someone. Partners are attached to one another because it gives them a sense of feeling of security inside. We become attached to our homes because it gives us a sense of security. We become attached to our cars and our gadgets because it gives us a sense of security. So we are all seeking some sort of security, and whatever it is that gives us that sense of security, we become attached to it. But this sense of security is mostly emotional and practical security. So this is what creates these attachments in this world. And attachment is a very beautiful thing. And we should not always try to see how to become detached. Detachment is an incredible spiritual virtue. But attachment is a bigger virtue in spiritual life. But that attachment has to be something of spiritual in nature. And in between attachment and detachment, there is something called a commitment. And it's very interesting because most of us think that attachment causes all the suffering. And so therefore I want to be detached from all the suffering. And that is why we are seeking detachment, because attachment is causing pain. So the very reason to be detached is somewhat flawed. It's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So we have to first understand that the cause of suffering is not the attachment. It is the cause of suffering is the attachment to the wrong objects. Because when you're attached to your sadhana, when you're attached to spiritual growth, when you're attached to the divine, those are beautiful attachments because those attachments will completely set you free in the world. But what we have to become detached from is detached from the results of all our actions and our efforts. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's a very beautiful text where it is explaining Maya Shakta Mano Buddhir, where Krishna is explaining that it is important to attach our minds to the divine. Because attachment to the mind with material things and temporary objects, it brings us unnecessary disturbances and suffering. So it's important to understand that detachment is not the cure to our pain and suffering. So we have to see how to attach ourselves to our transcendental spiritual nature. When you become attached to your spiritual nature, you will notice that there's a tremendous amount of joy because that joy is coming from inside. And you may notice that sometimes we want to be detached because we are afraid of making commitments to one another. You will notice in relationships this happens, that we are dating, we don't want to make commitment, we don't want to make commitment. And so we remain detached so we can maybe have more fun in the world with more partners and more other probabilities in the world. Because we're afraid of commitment to one, so we can have an open space to explore more material attachments. You may also notice that people don't like to commit themselves to themselves by practicing their daily spiritual sadhana. They're afraid to commit, thinking that there may be a million other options out there. And what if there is some better options? Am I missing out on something? So we don't commit to ourselves. It is explained in the yoga text, wisdom text of the yoga. It explains, Tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. It means through commitment, you can attain the highest uh, experience of relishing that spiritual love. But we are afraid of commitments. We want to do the minimum in the world because we don't want to become attached to anything, because we are afraid of missing out something else in the world. So the very important questions that we have to ask ourselves is that, why do you want to be detached? And the minute you ask yourself these questions, why do I want to be detached? You'll notice you're attached to something. And then you analyze, what is it that you're attached to? And you'll notice that what the thing that you're attached to, the one that you're attached to, is maybe causing you suffering and pain. So we have to see how to attach to the spiritual component of that attachment. Say, for example, I'm attached to Bodhva. I like his smile, I like his energy, he's a lot of fun, he's very humorous. What I'm basically describing is everything that comes out of Bodhva is what I'm attached to. But what if Bodhva's jokes, after 5 years, he runs out of jokes and he cannot entertain me anymore? It's possible that Bodhva may run out of jokes after 5 years. Maybe I have heard all his jokes within the 5 years, I have finished hearing all his jokes. This relationship with me and Bodhva is finished, because the foundation of this relationship was Bodhva's humor. But there's more to Bodhva than just his humorous side. He's a very deep, loving, kind person. So if I attach myself to the real, compassionate, loving Bodhva, then there is no need for detachment. But if my relationship with him is based on his qualities and attributes for the sake of entertaining others, then that runs out.
Mais
And my
si
attachment is over. Now I want to run away from him as far as possible. So then I become frustrated. I am no longer able to enjoy the jokes of Bodwa. So there is a difference, with detachment and frustration, or renunciation and frustration. Renunciation means that you're unwilling to try, and you're not willing to try and enjoy matter. And inability and frustration means inability to enjoy. Like, for example, Ram can do a fast. Just give me a second. I need to plug in the. He is fasting because, he maybe has a bad stomach from eating too many Mexican food. And Ramananda is fasting because he's fasting for Ekadasi, for his spiritual awakening. So Ramananda is not eating because of spiritual awakening, and Ram is not eating because his stomach is sick. They're both doing the same thing. One is doing it for a spiritual cause, and one is doing it for a health cause because he just can't eat, cannot enjoy. So we have to understand, when we are attached to something, what is it that we are attached to? What is causing that attachment? What is the consequence of that attachment? I always explain this simple principle of intent, content, and consequence. So it's very important to understand, in this process of understanding detachment, why is it that we want to be detached? Is it because we're afraid of commitment? Is it afraid of pain? And then you'll realize that you actually don't need to be detached. What you need to do is you need to be attached to the right content of that person. Is that child really yours? Because if it is really yours, you can't take the child with you. So what it is that you have simply been given a gift in this world. And it is your beautiful gift from God to take care and nurture, nourish, and help it grow into a beautiful soul. If you become attached to molding that person the way you want to mold it, and they don't conform to you, and then you may become supremely disappointed. So therefore, we have to understand that everyone in our life are beautiful transcendental gifts. How can we take care of that gift and nurture it, and to make sure that that gift is even becomes more beautiful in your association and your company? So therefore, when we become attached to our children, attached to our husbands, families, those attachments, they're going to cause you suffering and pain. Yes, no doubt. But if you love them for who they are and what they are, you love that soul inside of that body, you love that person, then the attachment is very beautiful. Because that is spiritual attachment. You're attached to the spiritual component of that person. A few days ago, one of the ladies in our Connecticut community, her mother had passed away. And she was completely distraught and completely broken. And so I did a class one evening to explain how the transmigration of the soul works and what is death and how beautiful it is. And finally, she was able to, as the mother was passing, I gave the class and I guided her on what to do. And the next morning, the mother left the world at 6:50 a.m. Is to understand that her mother never left. It was just her body that no longer existed. So to attach ourselves to the characters of that person and those person's spiritual attributes and qualities, it's a very beautiful thing. It's easy to love everyone when you see the spiritual side of all beings. It only becomes difficult when we forget the spiritual nature of that person and we are focused on the externals. So the real detachment is explained in the yoga as spiritual attachment. No one ever leaves this world because the memories of those personalities, their spiritual qualities, will remain in the world forever. It has been hundreds of years and we're still talking about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the great saint, Haridas Thakur, and many, many other saints. They have long gone, but their qualities and their attributes, they inspire thousands and millions of people even to this day. What is important is the character, the substance that we truly are, the spiritual element. And that is where we need to increase our attachment. And we have to increase our commitment to ourselves and not be detached from ourselves. You can never be sufficient. You can never fulfill anyone's desire in this world. So the sooner we realize that we cannot fulfill the desires of people, we can never make someone completely satisfied, then we can remain peaceful because we are always giving our 100%. And if they're not satisfied, we still love them. And let them not be satisfied, we still love them. There was a